Welcome back to the channel. Thank you so much for being here, uncensored, unafraid. Truly appreciate all of you who support the channel. Thank you so much. Hope you all are having a fantastic day. This is a little crazy. Like, part of me gets it, but I also find it extremely annoying under the circumstances that we find ourselves. And that is the fact that Caitlin Clark faces a fine of, I believe, up to $10,000 because she was not made available to media after the last game. I know 10,000 is a drop in the bucket for her, but here's the thing. Caitlin Clark is always available. I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong in the comments, for when I looked at, I think at least two players have to be made available, right, as the players that come out and speak. And Caitlin Clark always, always, always is available. They did not make her one of the available players. But then, of course, a local reporter from the Valkyries team that was booing Caitlin Clark the entire game specifically asked for Caitlin Clark. And apparently, if that happens, even if they're not one of the players who is going out there, it's still part of the rules that they actually have to do it. And therefore, if they refuse, they are going to get fined. Now, while I'm one that believes pro athletes should not be able to duck and avoid media all the time, I also think this is a little absurd with the rule because they're basically saying no matter what, all the time, you need to be available. Even if you're not one of the players that is going out there, then what is the point of even having the certain number of players if the media can just request someone else and you get a player like Caitlin Clark, who was never given the opportunity to not appear in front of the media after a game? Because I get it. Look, I have no problem with it sometimes being the next day. I just don't, again, never ever played close to that level, but as an athlete who did play sports growing up, like, I understand the mentality and the mindset of what a player or an athlete might be going through after a game, especially after a loss like that, especially the way Caitlin played, especially the way the team played and everything else that is going on. Yeah, you know what? You might not want to be in that headspace in dealing with the media after the game. And I have no problem with that. And I will say that with other players as well. In fact, I would rather have a player not come out because we've talked about this before at times too about how unlikable a lot of these WNBA players are, and it comes out even more in post game, right? Like that's when everything is heightened in terms of how they feel about things. Again, especially if they didn't play well, or especially if their team didn't play well, or I don't know what the actual stat is, but I'm going to guess for a lot of these leagues because they're not allowed to be critical of the officials, which, by the way, I think is actually absurd as well. Like, to be fair, I don't like that rule in all of sports. I mean, I guess at some point there's kind of a line that needs to be drawn, but for a coach or a player to comment on the officiating and not attack officials personally, but just talk about how terrible a call was or how it impacted the game in a negative way and should have never been called, that should not be a fine. That is absurd. I think the leagues actually make things worse in terms of relationships with fans and all that by doing that to players. But when is what to back up a second, what I was getting to is probably 99% of that criticism that ends up getting a fine for these athletes and coaches is immediately after games. Because again, they're in that headspace, right? They're emotional. It just happened. They're competitors. They just lost. They feel like that is one of the reasons, if not the reason, they lost. So yeah, I mean, it just happened the other day with Becky Hammond talking about, free throw disparity in the calls and everything. So maybe it's a good idea that a team has to trot out a couple of players after, that's fine, and they get to select them, and other players you can talk to at other times. So anyway, let's dig into this a little bit. Caitlin Clark faces up to $10,000 fine from the WNBA. The Indiana Fever received a warning from the WNBA for the way the team handled Caitlin Clark's injury status during a game earlier this month. I did a video recently on Stephanie White's comments about that, which were so childish and petulant, but that's Go check that one out. Anyway, now it sounds like Clark and the team could be in trouble from the league yet again. On Friday night, the Fever fell to the Golden State Valkyries. It was Thursday night. I'm just saying, maybe I don't know, edit this or something. The Fever fell to the Golden State Valkyries 90-88 in what was a rematch of last week's contentious showdown. Unlike last week's game, where Clark led the way with a hot shooting performance, Clark struggled in what was the worst game of her season so far. Ended the contest with just 16 points. The first game all season where she's under 20. Now, she did only shoot 25% from the floor. Actually, wasn't it? I think it was less than that, wasn't it? Am I losing my mind? I think was she 3 of 16? And we know she had 5 turnovers, a couple of them coming at the end, blah, blah, blah. And of course, it was a reporter for the Mercury News in San Francisco uh, reported that Clark was not made available for interviews after the game, which she does not have to be, right? The whole team does not have to do it. The team selects players. But then, of course, he specifically asked to speak to the Fever star. Now, again, if Caitlin Clark is not the face of the league, as so many keep telling us, and she's not that good, as so many keep telling us, why do you insist on having to speak to Caitlin Clark? And of course, he went on to X to complain and said Caitlin Clark was not made available to the press after the Valkyries beat the Fever 90-88. I asked Fever PR to talk to her, and they said she was not going to talk tonight. And again, I don't have a problem with that, and I will say that for other players as well. But of course, because of the way this nonsense is set up, Caitlin Clark, despite being available to the press all of the time, they're going to punish. Well, I shouldn't say we don't have it officially, but most likely they're going to punish her with the fine. She may not have wanted to speak to the media, but players are contractually obligated to do so under the WNBA's media access policy. No later than 10 minutes following the game, each head coach and 2 players, leading scorer and key contributor per team, will be available in the separate press conference room for in-person and room media, the WNBA policy states. Now, this is a quote within the article. We already saw that they got it wrong by calling it a Friday night game. So I don't have confirmation because it's in parentheses that leading scorer and key contributor, what that actually means. Okay. I mean, or I should say, I don't know if that is specifically correct, that the leading scorer must be one of the players. Um, so I guess they're saying Caitlin Clark led the team. Despite that incredibly bad performance we keep hearing about, she led the team with 16 points. So according to the policy, she should have been out there, and they face a fine. Players are often punished for skipping mandatory media availability. This often results in a fine, and penalties could potentially be steeper this season under the league's updated collective bargaining agreement, as the new CBA reportedly allows fines of up to $10,000 for compliance-related violations. Back in 2024, Clark's rival Angel Reese was fined $1,000 for refusing to speak to the media after a game against the Fever. Reese recently indicated that she could choose to take more fines this year rather than speak to the media at times. Well, she might not be doing that if it's going to be $10,000 as opposed to $1,000, even though she's making more money on the court this season. That's a pretty steep fine
The
to
sports
not speak
media
to the media.
waits on
So yeah,
every single move that a white person.
sorry about that. Autoplay is not my friend. But yeah, so this is kind of wild stuff. I mean, it's going to be interesting to see if she gets fined. But again, she's not the face of the league, so I don't know why you need to talk to her after every single game. She clearly wasn't in the right headspace to be Caitlin Clark, right? I was trying to think of how to word that, because we know what a good job she does and what a great ambassador for the game in the WNBA she is. And, she might have felt like, I'm not going to be able to put that out there. Therefore, not only for her benefit, but for the benefit of the league and the PR and all of that, let's skip it. I'll talk to the media the next day. I don't know. Let me know your thoughts. Should Caitlin Clark be fined? Should Caitlin Clark have to be available to the media every single game? Because she seems like the only player that happens to. Do me a quick favor, like, comment, subscribe. Y'all know the drill. I will talk to you later.